a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
To mute the YouTube. I think I always forget to do.
We're on top of it this time.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't even, like, when I sat down to write the discussion questions for this, I had so much to say and no way to organize it all, so.
Yes. Yeah, this is I think a book that's hard to like separate out almost. Because it all works together so cohesively.
Yeah, there were 3 watching, then there were 2, now there's 1, so I'm not sure if anyone's here, or...
That's okay.
I don't know how long you want to give it before we go ahead, since we are a little bit late.
Right. Because I had audio problems once again, everybody. Yeah, maybe like 2 or 3 more minutes, and then we can start the intro stuff. I think that'll be good.
I've got so many tabs open. I need to close some of these Word documents. Okay. Yeah, say hi in the chat if you're here, so we know. Hey, Ezra. You could come. Okay. We'll give it another minute and then get started. We can do the intro stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. What do you want to do, Cara? Do you want to start?
Yeah. So hello everybody. I'm hoping you can't hear the echo, and it's only me. So let me know in the comments if you can hear it. And I'll try to do something else. If not, I will just ignore it. So hello everybody. My name is Kara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I am very excited to have Hannah leading the discussion for As Long as the Lemon Trees Grow by Zoulfa Katouh. This is part of... Yes, they actually have been with me. I was prepared. Oh no, there is an echo.
Oh no, I can't hear it at all, so I don't know what's happening.
I don't understand. Because I don't, that'll be super distracting for everyone.
Listen, nothing's going to be as bad as when we did a bit of that was...
that's our strategy is with one almost unbearable. Okay, so I'll continue to do the intro stuff, and since Hannah's going to be leading the discussion part, I'll just stay muted for most of it. I don't remember where I was now because my audio is a disaster. So anyway, as long as the lemon trees grow, this is part of my Not a Genre Book Club, which is all about reading and celebrating middle grade and young adult books, and giving them the kind of discussion that they don't always get. And also one thing, or a few things before we get into the actual book discussion is we wanted to share a few Palestine-specific resources. It is very thematically connected to the novel, and we just felt it would be. It makes sense for this book, I think, to talk about it. So I have already linked Hannah in the description box, and I also have a few links on resources, like places to donate. Be pretty specific with those because a lot of aid is not being able to get into Palestine, but the Palestinian Children's Relief Fund is one, UNRWA is another, and then especially for my fellow U.S. folks, the biggest thing that we can do is to pressure our representatives for a permanent ceasefire. So I also linked some resources for that. And
permanent ceasefire, and also to refund UNRWA, because that's really important.
Yes. Yeah. That is also a big something that would have a huge impact. And also the St. Martin's Press boycott. Probably most people in the bookish space have heard about that. But just in case you haven't, or you're not fully clear on what's happening and why, I put a few links for that. And Hannah also introduced me to the Let's Talk Palestine Instagram, which is excellent. A lot of great and very easy to digest resources there. And of course, this is just a starting point, but we just wanted to highlight some of the, I guess basic you could say. So yeah, I think that's everything from me. So I'm going to mute myself and pass things over to Hannah.
Yeah. Okay. So a few housekeeping-y bits. So we normally, for these discussions, try and do a non-spoilery section at the beginning of the discussion. I think it's going to be difficult to discuss this book without spoilers, so we're not going to do that, but we are going to start with the general context, like Syrian revolution stuff that's not so specific to the events of the book, so that should be fairly light on spoilers, I think, and then we'll get into once we get into the details of the book discussion, that will be spoilery, just for anyone who's watching or anyone who's watching this back later and hasn't read the book yet. And content warnings before we start, because there's a lot. So the ones I've got down for this book are bombings, death, kind of gore, medical trauma, blood, shootings, hallucinations, injury and death of children, panic attacks, PTSD, grief, starvation, violence, attempted rape and drowning. And I expect that pretty much all of those are going to come up in the discussion to some degree. So just take care of yourselves if you need to. Cara, I don't know if you had any more to add to that list.
I think you got all mine. I pulled a couple from your list that I had forgotten. I think you've got chemical weapons.
Yeah,
is another one. I think you might have said, but I think that pretty much covers it.
Okay, so you've done kind of the introductory bits. I am not going to introduce myself on this channel. I think we've done that enough times. But as a kind of general introduction question, how much did you know, Cara, about the Syrian revolution before you read this, and has that changed, or has that?
So I really connected to when the characters are talking about the news coverage of it, because that was pretty much the extent of my knowledge. And it often wasn't even called the Syrian Revolution, which I think is another big piece of it. But I really did not know anything about like the dictatorship and the living conditions prior to the revolution. And after reading this book, I definitely know more about what led up to it and how long it had been happening. Because that is another thing that I was not aware of. And that part in the author's note where she's talking about going to school in Switzerland, and her friends are like, oh yeah, whatever happened with that? Which is like as if it's a high school friend that you lost touch with. So I think that is also very indicative of how it wasn't in the news cycle very long. Which definitely shaped my lack of knowledge about it. Yeah, that's kind of a meandering answer, but I think the book did a really good job of showing how Western audiences really don't know a lot about it. And not that I couldn't have found out more, but I also think part of it is we almost didn't even know what to look for. Like didn't know what questions to start asking kind of thing. So.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, and it's weird. I think the Syrian revolution got kind of buried in the rise of ISIS a little bit, and everyone kind of forgot what was actually happening in Syria to the people. And also, weirdly, lots of people who are like pro-Palestine and anti-colonialism and anti-dictatorship in other contexts don't have a problem with the Syrian dictatorship, which is really odd to me. But so there's quite a few like pro-Palestine authors who are apologists for the Assad regime. Like Susan Abu Hawa is a particularly prominent one, which a lot of people don't know. The author of Against a Loveless World and Mornings in Jenin, which is quite well known. People just think the dictatorship in Syria isn't a problem, which is really odd.
Yeah. I think also one of the things that I kept thinking about while reading this book, which the characters obviously talk about as well, is like the language used to describe it. Like the number of times that I have seen like American or other Western news sources just blanket describe something as like unrest in the Middle East is kind of wild. And I think unrest is such a sneaky word because it makes it sound like if they weren't such troublemakers, everybody could get along. And I think that connotation really colors the presentation of the news of what's happening. I remember seeing little bits on the news. I was pretty young, so I don't think my parents really wanted me to see too much. But I noticed. And they did show the reality of what was happening, but it was always framed in a very othering way. And again, certainly not calling it a revolution, and certainly not giving any kind of context for what was happening. There was also this weird underlying suggestion that they didn't come out and say, but it was like equating the Free Syrian Army to the dictatorship. They're both doing bad things. And it's like one of these things is not the same.
Yeah, but I think the language piece is really interesting too, because I think it's so interesting how different situations around the world ask us to use different language. So this book is all about revolution, not war, whereas and in Gaza at the moment they're saying, it's not a war, it's not a conflict, because that implies two armies, which this isn't in Gaza. But then with the Ukraine situation, the Ukrainians were saying, call it a war, because invasion implies that Russia's, invading some defenseless country, and actually the Ukrainians are fighting back. So I think it's really interesting which people in which situations choose which words for themselves.
Yeah. And a lot of things that are related to language it's mainly about listening to the people involved.
Yeah.
Which is such a basic thing, but that really informs a lot of how we handle any kind of issue. Is like the words we use for it are so important. And especially like what we label things.
Yeah. And also the fact, I don't think the author's note of the book really goes into it that deeply, but the fact that the Syrian revolution is still going on in a way.
Yeah.
Like, the dictatorship is still there. You know, it kind of gets treated separately to the rest of the Arab Spring, partly because I think the government hasn't been overthrown. And I don't know, I don't know if people realise more after the earthquake last year, how differently it was handled in Turkey and Syria. I don't know if that brought it more to people's awareness or not, who didn't know before. But I think the context of the book becomes more horrifying when you know that it's not finished.
Yeah. And it's like a really embarrassing lack of attention span. Like as we see with what is happening in Palestine now, it's like there's that rising outrage. You know, news channels are showing it. It's in the media. And then it kind of just tapers off. It's not that they're not talking about it at all, but they sort of carefully phase it out almost. To the extent that I am ashamed I did not realize the Syrian revolution is very active still. You know that it is still ongoing. I was looking up things while reading this book because I realized that without consciously deciding this, that I was like, oh well, it must have come to some kind of conclusion, or we would have heard about it, which is ridiculous. but I definitely think that awareness is like a big part of how hard it is to do something about these conflicts. Conflict is a weird word to use for it, but I don't know where I was going with this. Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, no, and I remember listening to a news piece by Al Jazeera, I think it was last year, I should have checked this before doing the live show, where they were talking about how basically the dictatorship is paying a lot of travel influencers to come to Damascus and say like, hey, everything's great, tourists should come back. And how, you know, the minute you step outside of Damascus, you know, the whole thing collapses, and how awful that is. And I think, I don't know, because I feel like we have this expectation that in revolutions that revolutions succeed, like even if whoever replaces the original power structure isn't good, the revolution still has an effect. I don't know, I feel like from media and from history we've been taught that.
Yeah.
So when that doesn't happen, it feels, I don't know, everyone just gives up and stops talking about it, or I don't know.
Yeah. And I think they're also there's not this understanding of a revolution that is like a long drawn out siege. Because I'm thinking to my history classes. It's like you're saying like a revolution. It has a specific end that is better than we started, and that's how it ends. That's how it goes. And that kind of like one of the things I think the author conveys so well is just the exhaustion, and you're afraid and you're injured and you are seconds away from dying forever. And how like tiring that is, and how it's like hearing Salama
talk about like
the minutia for day-to-day life. And how it's like she's like, it's kind of boring, you know, it's kind of like repetitive. And that's not what a revolution is in popular culture.
Yeah, and so the book is set still in the first year of the uprising. Yes. Like, it hasn't even gone on for...
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, let's move on to talking about the book itself. So, what did you think? How much did you cry?
I loved it. It was so good. I was definitely emotional throughout. I think the strongest like tear reaction I actually had was with Layla. I'm sure we will get to that, but somehow I had not prepared at all for that. I think the emotional like depth here, and how much we see through Salama. Like we still focus on all of the people that this is happening to, even though they're not all our main characters. We there's such an emphasis on like humanity, and I feel like Salama as a character really emphasizes that throughout about knowing people's stories and not just being a headline. So very emotional throughout. There were some like specific scenes that were so hard, but I think were done so well, and like as the author says, all of these things happened and are happening. So I think it's really necessary that she includes them. But like the chemical attack was rough. Anyway, this doesn't answer your question. I thought the book was excellent.
No, good. I'm glad. I've been waiting for you to read this book for 3 years ago.
Finally, I read it.
I'm glad that it worked for you. And I agree with everything you've said. I think it was really powerful. I think it's really difficult. I mean, you can, just from the list of content warnings, you can get a sense of the horror of it, but it doesn't feel gratuitous. It's, I think part of that is the humanity, because it's not just tragedy after tragedy, but it's actually the impact of that on people and the moments of like life and community in between, which I think are so important.
Yes.
Yeah. And I thought it was interesting that she chose to condense everything into kind of the space of not even 9 months, a little while, which I've seen a couple of reviews that didn't like that and thought that, I don't know, it was over-sensationalizing the events, which I don't think I agree with.
Yeah. Especially because like she didn't change any of what happened.
Yeah.
It just happened closer together. Also, those things were definitely happening already. So
yeah. When I also think that the fact that it's still happening means, like, even if I don't think it feels, even though clearly it is only happening in the space of a very short time, it doesn't feel like that. Like, it feels like there are days in between, and
also like personally I don't think it's possible to sensationalize war crimes. I could see if people didn't like that she took liberties because it's already so hard for people to know the reality of what's happening. But I don't think sensational is a good word for it, in my opinion. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting plot choice, and when the author's talking about why she did it, I think story-wise it made a lot of sense because for the character of Layla to work, that had to happen. But it is interesting how that affected like the whole timeline of the story.
Yeah. And what did you think about the discussion of leaving versus staying?
I thought it was so good. And I feel like I'm not going to be very articulate about this book. I apologize in advance. But one of the things that I am most impressed with is how like I can understand everybody. Like even at the beginning when we're just kind of meeting everyone else at the hospital, and Salama is thinking about how incredible like the presiding doctor is and how he's doing so much, and she mentions that he got his kids out immediately, and like Salama wasn't judging him for that at all, but there was kind of this like, to me there was a suggestion of not that what he did was easy at all, because it's not, but this suggestion that people can afford to make more sacrifices when they're the only ones making them, which is not at all to cheapen what he does and his bravery. But I just think that's an example of how I can understand why Keenan is, or am I saying his name right? I'm sorry. Keenan, okay. Because it's spelled similarly to a cousin I had, so I was like, maybe I'm just assuming. But I can see why he sees it as like giving up. But I can also see why Salama is like, you can't just make this choice for yourself if it affects your siblings too. Like I loved him, but I was really upset with him when he was like, they'll be fine. I have to stay here. And Salama got mad at him, and I loved him for it. And just the idea of not owing giving up your life in order to make a point almost. Like basically what Salama was saying to Keenan, that there's a lot of ways to make a difference, and he shouldn't feel like he only has one option, especially if that option involves putting other people at risk. It's so complicated.
Yeah, and I think
which is the point.
I think the book does a really good job of showing how much it hurts both of them, and how difficult it is to, even knowing that it's the right thing to do, or it seems like the best of a choice. You know, it's so hard for them to leave their land and their places where where all their memories are and where their families are and what were.
Their families buried. Yeah. And I also really like. Basically, I guess I love when Salama gets angry. I'm so on her side for it. But when she, I think it's probably when she's talking to Keenan, and she's like, do you think that I'm making this choice lightly? And I feel like the book really shows that that's like a different kind of bravery. That it takes so much to give up your land and where your family have lived for generations, and like it takes strength to choose to live, to survive. And that they shouldn't have to make this choice, but they're not wrong for making it.
Yeah, and reading it this time, I just couldn't help but see the parallels with what's happening right now in Gaza, and the people who have left, who have been able to leave, and the people who have chosen not to or have not been able to. And you know how difficult a decision it is for everyone, and how also the trauma doesn't end when you leave. You know, like you look at some of the journalists who've left Gaza and they are completely shattered, and I've seen a lot of people saying, you know, that like you can see the change in their whole bodies, that now that they're out of the zone, the trauma, you know, the trauma's catching up with them, and now they're no longer running on adrenaline. And how, because I know there's a short story, I haven't read it, but in the paperback release of this book, there's a short story about kind of epilogue of them when they get to Germany, which, yeah, I don't know, Azra, if you've read it or if anyone else has. I don't have the paperback, but I think that's so interesting that that's written, and I would love to know what's in it and how.
Yeah. I have the hardcover as well, so I read the regular epilogue when they're in Canada, but that would be interesting.
Yeah, and I think as well as talking about the Syrian revolution, also the book in a sideways way has a lot to say about refugees on small boats, which is also a topical issue. Like the idea that no one would be on a boat like that if they had any other choice.
Yes. Yeah, the persistent idea that somebody would make this choice lightly is infuriating. And I feel like that's one of the, like you were saying, I think that's one of the things that this book could hopefully be very persuasive of, like, because we see not just the emotional toll that leaving takes, but also just the logistics and like the things that they are fleeing from. And it's like, how could you read this book or like any story or any like article that talks about this and not understand that nobody does this because they want to. Or as you said, because they have any other options. And yeah, like any legislation that follows from that has to come after that basic humanity. It's a huge issue in the U.S. right now. Yet again. Especially because it's an election year and everybody wants to campaign on it. So yeah, I thought the way that the refugee discussion was like woven in was really good. And how part of what's making the decision to leave so difficult is that Salama knows that horrible things are happening to Syrians in other places too. Like they escape, and then things aren't better.
Yeah. I just think a lot of people could learn a lot of things by reading this book. Let's put it that way.
I would like to assign it to some people.
Yeah, and
I would like to assign it to some people.
Yeah, and what do you think about the fact that they are both so young? Well, the fact that it's a YA book and the fact that both main characters are so young.
I don't even know that I consciously thought about it as much, because it felt like, like the right choice for the book. Sorry, I think my audio is like the right choice for the book. Okay, let's see if that's. Now it's like a delayed echo, which is even worse.
Yeah, my connection is cutting out a little bit. I'm not sure if it's...
Okay, let me try.
Why is this always the way?
Okay, I think I'm just gonna keep going. I guess. I'm sorry. What were we discussing before my laptop? What were we?
My connection's still not right. Okay, I can hear you now, maybe a bit. Okay, it's slightly jumpy, but I think it's okay. We were talking about how young the characters are.
Yes. I think one of the things that
the choice to make it a YA book in general, I think
that it really highlights. Yeah. I think something it highlights is that this is happening to young people too. Of course, this is happening to young people too. And that nobody is ever prepared for it. The fact that Salama was like a pharmacy
and
suddenly she's doing life-saving surgery on people.
Yeah.
And she's doing the best she can. I feel like the choice to have these young adult characters, it really highlights how passionate young people are about doing something about injustices, and also how they are being given responsibilities and they are undergoing things that nobody should have to. But especially like teenagers, or very young adults, like early 20s, having to make the decisions that they do about do I put my 8-year-old sibling on a boat and hope that nobody does something to them, or do I keep them here and risk them being bombed? It's I think it's really showing how much they've been forced to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
Like poor Yusuf. And Mama, the toll it takes on children and young people, and having that kind of trauma in your life from such a young age. I think that was especially effective because the main characters are also young.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even baby Salama, if she had been born, like the life that she would have had. And I feel like the book makes a real point to make you think about what that would look like.
Yeah. There's that line from Keenan, which is one of the ones I had marked. That where he says I lost family before I was even born.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's something that really comes through in the book is what that is like. When you have a country that your family has lived in for so long, and yet there has been so much suffering there as well.
Yeah, and the discussion of like even before the revolution, when they lived happily and comfortably, it was still there. The dictatorship was still there, and that trauma was still there. And which is not to say that like everyone living in Syria is traumatized all the time, or has throughout history has always been traumatized, because that's its own kind of othering as well. But like this idea that intergenerational trauma, I guess, and the fact that that kind of pain doesn't go away. Yeah, and the other thing with because when all of this started in Gaza, the author I know said on social media at one point that it was an intentional choice of hers to make the characters so young, because it's true, and especially what Keenan's doing, putting stuff on social media, and it's the language skills, the fact that he speaks enough English to do that, and has the technology skills to be able to make videos like that and put them out. And when we look at Gaza, it's the same. All the faces that non like English speaking audience know are all in their 20s at maximum.
Yeah. And how getting the most like accurate and important information. A lot of us are getting it from like Instagram and Twitter because of these young people who are risking their lives to document it. And just because it's not like professional journalism, quote unquote, I think that kind of accountability and communication is huge for other people knowing what's going on. I think that kind of accountability.
Are we stuck again?
Probably. It's about
okay,
something to go wrong.
We're back now.
Something to go wrong.
We're just being shadow banned by YouTube, I think. I don't know.
I know.
Okay. Fine. So let's talk about the characters. We've talked about Salama and Keenan a little bit, but what did you think of them specifically?
I love them. Although as I said, anytime Salam and Kenan were fighting, not even fighting, but disagreeing or trying to see the other point of view. I like you, but I'm Team Salam. Which I think is a testament to like how well written she is as a character, and I just falling like she is trying so desperately to do the right thing at every moment of the day and help the most people she can. And it's like incredible to me that she. There's parts of the book where she kind of thinks of herself as a coward. Which of course she isn't, but she can't always see what she's doing as being resistance in the same way. I just really love and admire her, and I feel for her so much because I think it's such a natural human struggle to try and decide between helping a lot of strangers or helping your loved ones. Because Salama feels so guilty for leaving the hospital, and of course because of things that happen, it ends up not being I don't know. The decision sort of gets made for her in a way. But before that, she's experiencing so much guilt because she knows that she can continue, and she knows that she does help people. But also, how could you say to somebody, like, no, you're not allowed to take care of your last remaining family member?
Mm-hmm.
I think that her struggle was communicated so well. Like she's such a good person, but she still struggles with these things. And of course with daughter, that is like another big I don't know what you would call it. Like decision point for her almost, which I was assuming the whole time that she was bluffing. I guess we're not actually confirmed in the book that she was. And obviously what she did was not right. But also I think Keenan said it really well when he says, like, I'm not saying that what you did was okay. I'm saying that you already punished yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Also, anytime tried to pull the moral high ground card, I'm like, sit down, sir. No. Which again is not to like undercut what Salama did, which was horrible. But he's like, you would risk the life of a child, and I'm like. Yeah, you mean you do every day when you're like, I run a business, I can't just help people. Anyway, was not my favorite.
Yeah, I agree with everything. I loved Salama so much, and she's so, she has so many dreams, and I don't know, like, this is another one of those characters where I just don't have any of the words. But she's trying so hard. And I think we're going to get to Layla and Zoulfa, but the fact that even subconsciously she's holding on to hope so hard. Mm-hmm. And the fact that she finds it so difficult to tell Dr. Ziad that she's leaving just broke my heart. And I think she does tell him before the hospital is bombed, which I think was really important choice, because even though in the end the choice was kind of made for her, she still owns it before that.
She still made it.
Yeah.
And we see like even though she is understandably so afraid of what could happen to her, and she's thinking like the whole time, like I have to get out, I have to get Layla out. We can't stay here. But it takes her so long to do something about it because she doesn't want to leave, and she is brave. And she is a good person who is going to keep saving people as long as she can. But then also as she says to Keenan that you can't save anybody if you're not alive, if you're not around. And another example of like I can see both of your points when Keenan says, just by living here, I am resisting. I am saying that the dictatorship cannot push us out like this. They can't treat us like this. And Salama's like, yes, but who knows about it? Like, it is brave, and it I don't know. I understand what Keenan is saying. But also, I think Salama's more right.
Yeah, but I also think it's really interesting that she's kind of coming round to the idea of leaving just from talking to Layla, but she's really dragging her feet about it, and it's talking to Keenan that really, like hearing the way he talks, that makes her realise that actually no, leaving is the right decision. Which I think is true, because sometimes you need that perspective. Like in any situation, you can't always tell, like you can recognize things in other people that you can't always see in yourself.
And I think what really makes that so convincing is seeing his younger siblings, and it's like his decision to either stay all of them or to send them by themselves. Like he's not just making a sacrifice for himself. He would also be sacrificing them. And I think that's like the big thing that makes Salama kind of like you said, realize that we do have to leave.
And how did you feel about their romance and their relationship as well?
I thought it was lovely. He's such a charming nerd. that part near the end where like slow, like at this point Kenan knows about Katouh and he handles very well. Good for him. But they're on the boat, and she says something about how like he's gone now. And Kenan's like, good. I never liked that guy. And she's like, you could see him. He's like, yeah, but I just want to be too controlling or anything. But I liked him. So sweet. Yeah, and I think that the romance and how like tender it was. I think that's another example of what you were saying, where like even among all these horrors, people are living. I think that when Layla is convincing Salama that like you have to choose to live here in Syria, or it won't matter when you get to Germany. I don't know that I've ever thought about it in those terms before. But I think she's right. So I thought how all of that worked together with the romance was really beautiful.
Yeah,
and I agree. I'm not usually a fan of the like, characters met before and then they fall in love later.
Mm-hmm.
But I thought it was really good here. And when Slav was like, oh, we met in a wedding. That's so serious.
Yeah, and the whole thing felt so believable. Even though it's fast, you can completely understand why they have such a connection and why they get to that point so quickly. And they do, like, it doesn't feel like insta-lovey, or, it feels like a genuine romance, and they are just they're so good for each other.
Yeah. It's just so healthy. They respect each other so much.
Yeah, and also it's just so halal, and I really respect Zoulfa Katouh for making it so halal, because I can 100% see another author, especially given that they are in an active war zone, it would be so easy to lose that like halalness, and I can see other authors going down that route, but she's clearly put so much effort into keeping the Islam there, and I really, really respect that.
Yeah. And I feel like it also is when they're in situations where like he needs to help her up because she's in danger. It's like they talk about it as he's like, I'm sorry, and she's like, oh, that's okay, you were helping me. So they acknowledge it almost like the extraordinary circumstances do play a role, but that doesn't overtake their beliefs.
Yeah, and like they're still aware when they're doing something that they like shouldn't be doing, or otherwise wouldn't be correct.
Yeah, and they don't like I don't know, like put themselves in danger. Like they recognize that this is a necessity, but also by recognizing that they're like we wouldn't normally do this, and we still have lines that we don't want to cross. Which I think the author she clearly put a lot of effort and thought into that.
Yeah, because the one thing I always say about Muslim representation is that it's okay if the characters are not perfect, but the book has to be clear about the fact that they are not perfect, and if they are doing something that's against Islam, and I think this really does that. And it's not like, it's not in your face about like, oh, we shouldn't have touched each other, but like you said, it's like it's really natural in the conversation, in the dialogue. I think this is a really like strong example of how to write.
It's like in a perfect world, we wouldn't be by ourselves like this, but also we like there are bombs falling. I have to stay in this apartment.
Okay, let's talk about Hope and Layla. First of all, Did you guess about Layla?
No.
And
I did, and I was gutted. Especially because like when I have read similar like choices like in stories, I feel like I'm really good at picking up on it. I'm almost never fooled. And here I was. I literally never entered my mind. I did worry that Layla was going to die before they could leave, which would affect how Salama felt about leaving. But I did not expect that. But like it makes so much sense. Like we've already established that Salama like the way that her PTSD and her grief intersects has these unusual like they're kind of hallucinations, but also kind of isn't. So all of the groundwork was there, but I did not see any of it. Like I was planning to go to bed, and then I get to that part, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to see what happens. That I cried at that part. And when Salama's like, I didn't keep my promise, and I'm like, yes, it's not your fault. I was very emotional about that part. You couldn't tell. But also, I think that like you mentioned at the beginning, even though this is like you know a plot twist and it's such a gut punch, it doesn't feel manipulative at all. Mm-hmm. It feels like it was a choice made to serve the story, and like even though of course it's very upsetting, I'm like this makes sense with what we know about the characters and with what we know about how dangerous it is just existing in Syria. And it was incredibly emotional, but it didn't feel like emotionally manipulative in any way, which I think is very impressive. Yeah. So sad.
Yeah, I cried at that part both times. But it was there because I don't know if you can see the colours of the tabs, but the second time I read it, I was looking for it, and she does talk about, like on reread you can notice all the moments where, like when Layla doesn't pick up her phone when she tries to call her, and you know, like I'm just having a realization moment here.
Yeah. You know what's wild is like I did notice some of those because I noticed how Layla was. She was responding like when Salama's like, and we'll be happy in Germany, and I was like, But I thought maybe she was like really sick or something. You know, probably make it to them getting out. I did not think she would. Yeah, I'm trying to find the one of the exact parts. Oh. I'm getting saddle over. Like, of course you can't see her. I'm standing in front of you, silly.
Yeah, and like we know from nearly the beginning that like Layla doesn't leave the house because she nearly died, but it's so well written in the way that you just don't put that together with
like
anything else, and
sort of become almost like an accomplice.
Yeah.
In Salama not wanting to admit it.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting choice that Layla is obviously someone that Salama was really close to and knew really well, and Zoulfa is an entirely made-up person.
Yeah. But also like the scenes with him on the boat.
He's
not completely made up. Maybe.
I don't know.
I think that
was a
really interesting
choice.
Because
the book is still definitely a contemporary. It irritates me when people label something like magical realism. just because there's one of these kinds of elements. But Layla is
a hallucination.
I mean, how
kind of is.
But also he's like the universal embodiment of fear and survival. Yeah. I don't know where I was going with that.
Yeah, well, I think, from a storytelling perspective, it just wouldn't have worked any other way, because if Zoulfa was somebody who she knew, like, say it was her brother, it would be very obvious immediately that they were both not real. And if Layla was also a made-up person, then she wouldn't have been as impactful either.
Yeah.
So it kind of had to be this way, but I also think if we're saying in a very simplistic way that Zoulfa is the embodiment of fear and Layla is hope, then it makes sense that the one you're fearful of is kind of the unknown, the made-up one, and the one that gives you hope is the one you love. And
That's really beautiful, Anna.
Yeah. I like that ultimately, even though obviously how the way he pushes Salama to do things is psychological torture. Which is not good. But I do think it's really interesting that ultimately he's not evil. Which I think is so interesting because if he is this kind of embodiment of fear or the survival instinct, that sometimes that is something you need. Symbolically, I think that's really interesting. But also we see. I guess how give Salama the idea to hold Smart her name, to hold her hostage. He didn't give her the idea, but the fact that it was kind of a decision she made because of him pressuring her, I think also says something interesting about how the drive to survive and take care of yourself and the people close to you is sometimes necessary, but it also leads you to hurt other people.
Yeah, you're right. And I also think he's not, even though that's true, and even though he reminds her of her promises all the time, and he's not guilt, he's fear, and those are different.
Yeah. That moment when Salama decides that she's going to go to the protest, and she challenges help. She's like, show me your worst, give me all you got, and then leave me alone tomorrow. I like that. That's another example of Salama being such a brave person, but it's just not in ways that are very obvious. Yeah. I mean, and especially like with again another similarity to what's happening and has been happening in Gaza. Like the fact that doctors and medical professionals are specifically a target, and hospitals are like her just being there and being somebody whose job is to help people is enough to make her a target. And so even though she doesn't think of it, I mean she does obviously recognize every day that she is risking her life working at the hospital, but I don't think she necessarily thinks of it as I am being brave every day just by being here and wearing a lab coat. Yeah. I just love Selena.
Yeah, because I think it's impossible to have that kind of perspective when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, she's so focused on just surviving. And she's also of course thinking about all the things that don't make her feel worth capable. Like it's very understandable that she wouldn't have that kind of clarity about herself. And that's one of the things that I love about her and Keenan's relationship is that not in a way that's like he gives her self-esteem, but in a way where like he helps her see herself. Like you were saying, they make each other better. And I love that. We need some happiness. How did the end when they're I just we can't do this. I was like, okay. I was trying to talk myself into like that's what happened. I understand why. Because that is kind of the points of the story. I was like, but do it. I thought we were gonna lose the kids. I was so scared.
Yeah, the first time I read it, I genuinely thought they were all going to drown.
I know. They're all just fighting peace with the death, and I'm like, wait, no. But again, not emotionally manipulative.
Yeah. And I think another example of how all the characters in a book don't have to die for it to be valid or powerful or, sophisticated storytelling.
Exactly. Which is also very in line with this book club. Also, I can't even imagine reading a book that is like about the Syrian dictatorship and revolution and all of these human rights abuses and war crimes and being like, the main character survived, so I don't think there was enough trauma in it to be realistic.
Yeah, and I think, so also going back to what you said about the protest and when she says to Hope, like, show me the worst, but the book doesn't show us the worst, because by that point the book has shown us enough that you can draw your own conclusions without the book having to tell you, and I think that's part of, again, why it doesn't feel like trauma porn or whatever. It's not just showing us the horror for the sake of it, and when it doesn't need to, it doesn't.
And I think we get that emotional impact even from little moments that are not explicitly showing things. I think one of the things that was so effective throughout was every time she would pray that her brother was dead. Because the worst thing that happens is finding out that somebody was vegan and that they were not dead. And just that knowledge, that impact is so much by itself. It's like we don't need to see what is happening to Hamza. Just like the grief of Salama knowing. It's like she doesn't even have to tell the reader for us to feel like what this must be for your family to pray that you are dead. That is very effective all by itself.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you think about Salama's decision to spend the last couple of days at the hospital? Because I thought it was really interesting that she spends the whole book telling Keenan not to put himself in danger, and then in the last 2 days before they're going to leave, she's like, right, I'm going to spend every minute in the hospital, the biggest target in the city.
It's funny because I don't know if I was thinking about that decision in that context. But the one that I did was I think it was only like a week before they were going to leave or something. And it was like the revolution's anniversary. And she's like, I'm going to go to the protest. I'm like, Salam. Like, again, like we've been saying, it's like incredibly brave, but also like you and his two little siblings. You guys are so close. But also in a weird way. It's like, well, that's not my decision to make, though. That's kind of the point. Yeah. I think her decision to stay at the hospital until the last possible second. I think it makes sense in terms of her sort of acceptance of that she's leaving, but she has still done good and she can do more. Like, I think it makes sense in that way. But also, in light of her and Keenan's conversations, it's a little bit like, because don't they bring Yusuf and Mama as well?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess if it were a bombing target, at least they would die together and die quickly rather than be taken. Which is just an example of these horrible choices that they're having to make. So I guess in that way it makes sense. But
yeah, I think it also highlights how, like, getting on the boat isn't an end point. Mm-hmm. Like what you were saying about the protest, like, you're so close to leaving, but leaving isn't, like, the goal. Or even though they're trying to leave, they don't want to leave, and it doesn't, I don't know, like, they're not seeing that point as, I don't know.
The end in itself. Yeah. I was very afraid for Dr. Zaria.
Dr. Ziad, yeah.
Ziad, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, he ran back in. But I also understand why he did it.
Yeah, and like him and Noor and the babies, like, we don't know what happens to them.
Yeah. And I think it's another way that the author makes it very clear what's happening and what people are capable of. I mean, the part where the doctor is like, I had to choose which ones to save. He could only go back one more time. I think that's another scene that is like really well done. Without getting into like specific detail. Yeah.
Okay. I think those were most of my main points. I think we've talked about the themes in all of this, so I don't think we need to spend more time on them specifically. Did you have any more points?
I think you did a great job of covering anything that I was like specifically thinking about the discussion. I feel like I end up saying this about a lot of books that we read and discuss. But I feel like this is a really prime example of how a story can be very important and meaningful.
And it's also a very well done piece of art.
Yeah.
I
no words.
No words.
Only emotions.
Only emotions.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's such a human story. Like, the author's politics are very obvious, but the book isn't about that at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like one of those where it has a very clear moral compass. And if that moral compass points you to a political position like that. I feel like that's like a natural extension of it. I feel like it's a book that really, as you said, it's a very human story, and I'm like struggling. I gave up basically on reviewing it on Goodreads. So I'll need to figure out how to articulate some of it before I wrap up. But it's like so hard to explain how much heartache there is in the book, but also like there's so much love. And it's one of those stories where just the act of this story existing is also an act of love and an act of humanity and compassion and everybody mattering. Like the part where the boat sinks and Salama is seeing some people who can't swim anymore, and she's thinking about how it'll be a good headline for like a donation drive, and then everybody will move on. And I think books like this are just one of the ways that we can stop that from happening. That we can make sure that we keep talking about things and doing something about them. As we were saying at the beginning, with like the new cycle of the attention span, you can feel like we only have room for one crisis at a time, and that's not how the world works. Unfortunately. I don't know if I had a conclusion there.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there is a conclusion.
Yeah.
To be drawn. I think maybe that's part of the point as well.
Yep. Yeah, there's a lot in the book about memory as well. Which we kind of talked about in conjunction with like stories and family and grief. And I think all of that really encapsulates what I'm trying to say about like a story being an act of love and an act of resistance. Like Salama sees every patient she loses as a person and as a huge loss. And through Salama's eyes, we can see that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the Ahmed, the child who says, "When I die, I'm going to tell God." That's another bit that made me cry both times.
I'm pretty sure there's a that for me as well. I think the Sarah and Heather was another one that really, like with the kids specifically, and how Salama and I think it's interesting too because at a few points in the story we see Salama and Noor and maybe the doctor as well. I don't remember. But they don't spend a lot of time on it. Obviously, they're always busy. But it's like the trauma and the emotional impact of people working in these conditions. The whole therapy. What's that? And how part of the suffering is from the people being forced to like have to function in this every day and have to do such a complicated job in circumstances that are just unbearable. It made me think about how during first or second year of the pandemic, and I remember seeing like news anchors, like this news reporter who was reporting from a hospital in LA, which LA had very badly hit by a lot of the deaths early on, and she just broke down crying live on camera because she had been doing this for months, and she had been interviewing families who didn't get to say it just like the toll that it takes on people who have to work in these conditions. I think it's not the focus of the book, but we definitely see it.
Yeah. And I had a point to make and now I've forgotten what it was, so never mind. Yeah. Okay. I think, yeah. I don't think I have anything more to add. So, shall we do quotes?
Yeah. Let's do it. I have a bunch. I have more.
Okay, why don't you start?
Okay. From Keenan. Precious boy. When he says, there are enough people hurting you, don't be one of them.
Yeah, I had misery reigns strong in the dead, heavy branches and rubble, thwarted only by the hope in people's hearts.
If Damascus should ever fall from the dictatorship's clutches, its grip would vanish from all of Syria. Damascus is the capital. Every decision made there affects the people all over the country. She is their stronghold. Victories for our ancestors throughout history are embedded in her soil, but she belongs to the people who are laying down their lives to free her.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was what I was going to say when you were talking about the chemical attack. I think it's really interesting that she put that in there because lots of Western governments said if they start using chemical weapons, we will intervene. And they did, and they didn't. And she doesn't even... That doesn't come up in the book, and she doesn't mention it in the author's note or anything like that. But I think it's really important that that was one of the things that happened, and that was shown.
Yeah. One thing that I consistently was noticing about the writing is how much the image stood out to me. Like sometimes it wasn't even something that I would encapsulate as like, oh, this is a great quote. Like sometimes it was, but sometimes it was just like the image of this, like the feeling of this. Like one of the ones that I kept thinking about and I kept coming back to is I lose track of time as I try to race against it and catch the souls before they rise from their bodies. Like just that picture of trying to hold on to somebody's soul is. I just trail off. No word.
Yeah. This is the land of your father and his father before him. Your history is embedded in this soil. No country in the world will love you as yours does.
Mm-hmm. This is one of the parts that we were talking about at the beginning, this really resonated with how the revolution was portrayed in the West. When Keenan's talking about the videos, he says, "I'm making a difference. I'm adding English subtitles and explaining what's going on, so people can know. Arabs know, but the rest of the world doesn't. They don't know it's a revolution. They have no idea we've been living in a dictatorship for 50 years. The news show the military killing people. They don't know who the Free Syrian Army is, who the military is. Syria is just a word to them. But to us, she's our life. I can't leave her."
Yeah, also the fact that it has to have English subtitles for it to make a difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also thought the part where she's talking about fate and free will was really beautiful. Fate has his strings, but we're the ones who twist them together with our actions. My belief in what's meant to be doesn't make me a passive player. No. I fight and fight for my life. Layla fought for hers. Keenan fights for his. And whatever happens, we accept the outcome, knowing we did everything. The balance of free will and also having trust or faith that at some point you can't do anymore. It's like I couldn't articulate it. But when I read that, I'm like, yes. That's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, and just the fact that you can do everything you can, but at the end of the day, God's plan is God's plan, and
yeah, and it's the way that it's phrased is I think so interesting because it's like I don't know, not to get into too much metaphysical discussion here, but like God knowing what's going to happen doesn't mean that you don't have choices that lead to that, you know? Yeah. On that note, that was the quote I said. Let's end with some existential philosophy.
Yeah. Okay, I've got one more, which is time is the best medicine to turn our bleeding wounds to scars, and our bodies might forget the trauma. Our eyes might learn to see colours as they should be seen, but that cure doesn't extend to our souls. Yeah, and I do know the idea that your own souls and coming, back to intergenerational trauma, the idea that, this, it carries on.
Yeah. A lot of the again, like imagery that I think was really powerful about the physical embodiment of memory and of history. Like all the different places where characters talk about how like your country is in your bones, or is in their blood, and like when they're leaving Layla's house that obviously Zoulfa has also been living in, and she kisses the door. It's like this very physical thing. Yeah. And the line that I couldn't find just now. But about having Syria under your fingernails. That is just so evocative. I guess is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, I thought also all the ways in which the nature and the earth reflects Salma's feelings as well, like the way that's written in the trees and the ground and the
I thought, okay, this just reminded me. Something that I thought was like so cute or like funny when Salam is finally like, how do you always smell like lemon? He's like, my dad's cologne. I love that because I feel like that is such a like not just young adult people act like it's just YA, but like any kind of like romantic relationship or like love interest character, and like they always smell nice, even though like the world's on fire, everything's falling apart. She's like, you always smell like lemon, and he's like literally it's just cologne. I love that.
Yeah, well, I also love that he's using his dad's cologne. Like,
I know, it's like an emotional moment, but it's also kind of funny or like clever. I love how that subverts the
Okay. I think that's a nice note to leave it on. So let's.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hannah, for leading us in this discussion. I'm so glad I got to talk about this book with you, and that I finally read it now. Apologies to everyone again for whatever happening. The audio or the internet. So our February book, we're having a little mini reunion of the Frances Harding read-along. So we are going to be reading Island of Whispers. Yes, you're so prepared.
You can't even see the title. It's
very shiny. And that's going to be on my channel again. Hannah and I will be discussing. I realized we didn't officially decide who's leading it. I guess it would be me if we're still alternating. One of us will be leading the discussion, and I can't wait.
Yes, and speaking of books that made me cry, be prepared again. Even though this is, I think it's like 90 pages, and half of that is illustration. Still,
I am so excited to cry again. That could be like the subtitle of this book club, really. So excited to cry again. So thank you guys so much if you read along, if you watched with us, if you watched this later. Don't forget to check out Hannah in the description, as well as the resources that we talked about at the beginning, specifically for Palestine and what we do. A lot of it is fairly US-centric because the US is the primary player in the occupation. So but the boycott, for example, anybody can and is welcome to participate in. And obviously the couple of donation links I included, those also aren't necessarily US specific. And
a reminder that with the boycott, even if it's a book that's published by St. Martin's Press in the US and you're an international reader and the book is published by someone else, kind of holding reviews for that is also part of the boycott. Can also be.
Okay, that's a good detail to include because I don't think I had known that specifically. So anything else? I think that's everything. So hopefully we will see some of y'all for our next month. Thank you again, Hannah, so much.
Thank you.
Right.
Okay, thanks everybody.
Bye.